number of hours out, let's say, enjoying the Vegas nightlife compared to the number of hours to then recover from enjoying the Vegas nightlife, that scale tips, doesn't it, as you get a little bit older? Welcome to Cloud Realities, an original podcast from Capgemini. And this week, a conversation show exploring scaled and commercially aware innovation and how you can use it to grow your top line. I'm Dave Chapman.
I'm Esmee van der Giezen.
And I'm Rob Kernahan.
And I'm delighted to say that joining us is Karel van der Poel. He's the SVP of Products at ServiceNow and has driven their innovation programs over the course of the last decade and contributed hugely to the organic growth of that organization. Karel, what a pleasure to see you today. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Dave. Thank you for having me on the show.
It is a real pleasure. I'm looking forward to digging into some of the things that you've done. The scale is amazing. Before we get to that, though, I just wanted to touch on ServiceNow's big conference, which is called Knowledge 2025. It is happening in May, right now, in fact, May the 6th to the 8th at the Venetian in Las Vegas. So, Karel, what's on the agenda for the show? There's so much going on at the shows, the big tech shows this year. You know, the prodigious rate of innovation actually is very visible in the announcements. So, what are you excited about for that?
Oh, extremely excited. We got 20,000 of our biggest friends, joining us in Las Vegas. That's our biggest conference ever. And it won't be a surprise to you, but it's all about AI and workflow and data coming together in the AI platform of ServiceNow. It is the conference where we put all our innovation of the last 12 months together with all the customer stories. Financial analysts are there, press is there, and it's going to be a great event.
Very much looking forward to seeing the announcements coming out of that. And like I said, if you're listening to this on day of release, the conference is actually happening now. So I'm sure you can see some of those announcements online already. Now, Ez, how are you doing? You good?
I'm doing great. He's in Las Vegas, the Venetian, so I'm just, flashbacks.
You now have the mental images of it, don't you?
Now I actually have, yeah.
Now, does it occur to you as PTSD, or does it occur to you as nice memories?
Yes, for the people, I'd say, I explained to the people at home, like it's the Efteling on steroids. Yeah. And the Efteling is a huge theme park. But a lot of buzzing feelings, I must say.
I didn't know they had alcoholic beverages in the Efteling.
So everyone walking around carrying litre cups of strawberry daiquiri.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of slots machines. Yeah. No, it brings back good memories.
I assume you've done a fair amount of Vegas shows over the years, Karel?
I'm afraid I have. I did the math, and so it's 12 years service now. I think out of those 12 years, we did 10 years in Vegas.
Right.
And then prior to that, I visited a bunch of HP worlds and IBM worlds. I did the math, and the conclusion was I spent more than a half year of my life in Las Vegas.
Wow. And how does that make you feel?
Exactly. I do not want to answer that question.
How much of it can you remember is my question.
A fair amount, but definitely I prefer to forget a lot as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we were at Google Next a couple of weeks ago, and we also had the conversation. Not necessarily that amount of time. I mean, that's terrifying. More though that it was moving up all of our most visited destinations charts. Very rapidly. I think it's probably top one or probably top three for me at the moment. It was your first visit, of course.
It was my first, but to be honest, I actually hear Marshall saying in the back of my head, please do not mention David Copperfield again. We went to a show of David Copperfield.
We did.
But it's amazing, right? It's like once you get to a certain stage or a certain size, it's just no other place you can have conferences anymore.
Yeah,
it's totally right. When you go to some of the other conference venues around the world that will remain nameless, the logistics just don't work.
They don't work.
You can't get in and out of the place. There's massive queues for cabs or buses or trains, and because the shows are so massive, the actual execution of them feels really awkward, and the beverages are really difficult to get hold of. Yeah, I entirely agree. Vegas have got that nailed, haven't they?
Yep, they do.
Anyway, Robert, what's confusing you this week?
Well, David, it's more of an update on a confusion, and I'm becoming more intrigued than confused, which is we've discussed in the past.
We didn't discuss pivoting this piece. Did you get any memo on changing the bit, Marcel?
I am
to intrigue instead of confused.
the intrigue slot. No, I'm just doing it. I'm taking liberties.
Confusing us, but he's confused.
Oh, there you go. Then we're still confused.
I don't know how we managed to get this stuff recorded.
You see, I'm taking initiative and I'm innovating on the podcast live as we go.
Very on trend for this episode, Rob.
Yeah, exactly. It's the big tech versus big government, right? And it's the story is unfolding. So remember, we had the confused about who's going to win. I don't know which way it's going to go. EU just announced this week because Apple they don't believe, complied with the App Store thing about opening up their ecosystem. The big fines have arrived, and there's a big. It's going to go to court, no doubt, and there's going to be lots of arbitration, all that sort of stuff. But actually, the legislation landed. Everybody said, "I'll be all right." They kind of played with it, but it's landed. It's been applied. They've been seen to be non-compliant in the view of the EU, and now big tech the big tech wars are starting the next iteration, which is okay. We created a law, you didn't abide by it, and I'm intrigued and confused about which way it's going to go and what happens next in this scenario, because it's actually quite pivotal between the who's actually in control properly at the end of the day.
So you implying in that question that the fines aren't just going to get paid? There's going to be a retaliation of some description.
Oh yeah, there'll be legal action taken. The response from the tech companies is they're not happy, as you might expect. Now the fines aren't as big as they've been levied before, but they're still significant, hundreds of millions of euros. So I suspect we're going to see a very lengthy legal conversation go on, played out in the courts, etc., to find out where it lands, because obviously tech wants to keep control of its platforms, and the EU saying no, you've got to open up. And they've thrown in one with Meta around the use of data and how your personal data is being used as well. So I think they're going to town on it, basically.
I mean, it feels like a sort of a pivotal moment of how regulation is going to play out. And for me, the important thing is the point forward from here as we get into a world of AI and agents everywhere. Being able to sort of understand how they work and maybe trust how they work becomes an important element. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. It also feels quite layered, right? You have discussions at customers, we have discussions in our own company, and then you have this on a larger and a bigger scale, and it's going all the way through to your personal data. So that makes it even more complex to, what's my take on this? I think it's quite complex, right? Do I want my data to be used to be trained? And on the other hand, you also see the value of it when you look at customers being helped and make impact in society with that same data, maybe.
The counter-strategic also, maybe the, regulation can't move at the speed of innovation. You get a drag effect. I wonder, Karel, whether you've seen or what your take is on regulation versus innovation, or whether they can cohabit nicely, or whether there is a tension in there somewhere.
Wow. Yeah, it's necessary, and it's also, if too much, it becomes red tape and it grinds you down. I think there's a reason why U.S. tech companies thrive in the U.S. It definitely has to do with less regulations, and so it's easier to innovate. But I'm also a European, and so I totally understand, and in many occasions also agree with the sentiment that we have here in Europe. But it's becoming all this whole notion of rewinding globalization and trying to undo dependencies. It's just really hard, isn't it? Even if we start hosting stuff in Europe ourselves, we probably still leverage AI engines that are running somewhere else, and whether they're owned by the Chinese or by the US, or it's just all these platforms are interconnected. So I don't know how this will end, or if it ever will end, and what, it's just very hard to predict. It's very complicated.
The bit, and I absolutely agree. There's this globalization, and the integrated supply chains are incredibly complicated, and you can't just remove one dependency from another. For me, though, this is very important because there's two very big things at play: the use of data and do I have control over my platform, or when it becomes a de facto standard, must it be open? And those two fundamental questions have been bounced around. The football's been bounced around the pitch for a long time, and I feel like this is going to bring it to end. I'm confused about which way it's going to go. Do you have the right to control your platform and keep a closed ecosystem, or should it be open? And what is appropriate use of personal data? So I'm intrigued to see where the conversation actually goes from a societal perspective, but also from a legal perspective as well.
I'll give you one future point, to think about. So use of data, right? We as Europeans are very concerned of use of our own private data in order to train AI and all kinds of other things. But the reality is we're already way past that point.
Yeah.
Most of the AI is not trained on human data anymore. It's been trained on AI generated data, right? It's like some of these discussions are a little too late, and data is still important, but artificial data and data created by AI is becoming even more important these days.
Are you actually saying that AI isn't interested in Dave's Instagram holiday statements and photos? This is quite surprising.
I'm sure Dave's holiday destination is not unique to like the rest of everything else. So the AI has already seen that holiday destination.
Yeah. Hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the first visitor in the Grand Canyon, for sure.
Oh, you've just reminded me of the time we went to the Grand Canyon and we arrived and we're just there. The awe has inspired us all. And Dave stood next to me as a park ranger's walking past. Dave turns to me and goes, "It's not as big as I thought it was." And you've never seen a faster double take from a person. That park ranger was quite taken aback that Dave was not impressed with the scale of the Grand Canyon.
Might have been our viewing position. I don't know what that was.
Just the way you casually said it. It's not as big as I thought it was going to be.
When you say something, it wasn't even meant to be a joke either.
It was a joke.
Anyway, look, thank you for that. Actually, a thought-provoking one, even though we didn't get the memo on you changing the show on us, Rob.
I'm just keeping it real, Dave, and keeping you on your toes, that's all.
Exactly. Okay, well, we'll talk about that after the show.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, let's get moving. So, Karel, let's maybe just start with your role, because it's extremely interesting and very directly connected to the ServiceNow story over the last decade or so. So before we get to that, though, why don't you just set out your role? What was a typical day like?
So a typical day for me would be to work with a lot of product teams. A typical day would be 7 or 8 product teams that share their ideas on new products, on new innovations. I would then shift my day to talk to as many customers I would have, typically 2 or 3 customer conversations a day as well, and getting the outside perspective on what we're doing at ServiceNow, how is new innovation being received. And then lastly, maybe not all on one day, that'd be a little bit much, but like during the week, there's also
it does sound like a very full day, especially if it was a Monday. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, on a Monday, it's a little bit more internal meetings.
Yes.
No, I don't want that at all, but it's necessary evil, I would say.
Fair enough.
You got to sync the calendars. No, I prefer to actually talk with either the product managers or the engineers or the customers. Those are my favorite people to talk to because I always learn something new. Not so much from the internal management meetings. We have them because they're necessary.
Then that's fair.
Necessary evil. That sounded like a necessary. It's the same everywhere, isn't it? Yeah.
It could be evil if they go on too long. I think we're very good at ServiceNow, and we're very good in
keeping them tight.
Keeping them tight. So that's the beauty of an American company.
There is an efficiency in a meeting you can have. You do need that little social interaction at the beginning where you all sort of align about, the emotion, and then you go through it, and then don't drag the conversation out and move along now. I think there's that. And sometimes some organizations might try and drag things out much longer than they should. And maybe there's a mindfulness about this meeting could have been an email type conversation.
I've actually had an example of that now people are just asking before the meeting starts, are we into social or do we just want to talk about work? And sometimes it's just, no, let's just do work. Let's not do social. And that was also, that's also serving the team. I thought that was quite if you have psychological safety and you have like a certain team spirit already there, but why not?
Some cultures find it incredibly rude if you don't have the social interaction at the beginning before you talk business. And then other cultures, like you've just discussed, will go straight into business, fly through and exit, and that's how it's done. So it's quite interesting the way the dynamics can change. But I like that. The conversation at the beginning, are we going to have a little bit of a social check-in, or are we just going straight to business and moving along now?
Anyway, back to business.
I hate the long intros. That's what I really
they just quickly introduce yourself.
Quickly introduce yourself.
The entire career history. Yes. Credentializing themselves. I don't need you to credentialize yourself. I just need to know what your job is.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm Karel. I like pizza. Move on. Next. Yeah.
Anyway, Karel, we interrupted your day in the life.
Yeah. It's customers and internal innovation, and then a lot of one-on-ones. There's a lot of people where we just have like 15 minutes, 20-minute checkpoints. Whether those are people that you mentor or direct reports of you, or they're people that you collaborate with. So there's a lot of that. We have a culture of 25-minute meetings. Right. Not even a half an hour.
I like that.
So not a lot of time for chit chat. Obviously, when you don't know somebody, you need to establish a relationship. But once that relationship is there, it's very much to the point. And on your point on culture, there is a big difference whether you call somebody in India or the US or the UK or Israel for that matter. But I think the company culture is 25-minute meetings. If we can do it in 20, we'll do it in 20.
So if we go back then to the conversations you're having with product teams, sort of take us through the process of product development. What was the broad cycle like, and how were you winding customer feedback into that and sort of ensuring that you're driving innovation, not just a backlog of requests?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think the real answer is it depends. We have product lines at ServiceNow that serve 9,000 customers. And we have product lines who not yet serve any customers because they're not launched yet. They're new, right? And so we often talk about splash zones, and which is, what is the risk of getting it wrong? Well, obviously, if you get it wrong with 9,000 customers and you upgrade them all, you have a very unhappy install base. Whether as like if you have 0 customers and you're trying to get something out the door, you don't know whether you're right or wrong until you ship it. And then even if you got it wrong, you probably get feedback from 1 or 2 customers. So the negative impact is not so big. You can iterate and you can go a lot faster. So we have 2 very separate development cycles. The ones that are on a 6 months cadence for the large established products where there's a lot at stake. We want to make sure we run all the processes, checks and balances. There's a lot of work, big teams doing all the requirement analysis, but they're also probably a little bit more risk averse. And then you have the teams who are out there to get to 9,000 customers as quickly as possible, but they're at the beginnings of that journey. And we allow them to go faster, to be more agile, and also to take more risk. So there's we have like 3 archetypes of products, and they all have different management styles, if you will.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing. Like you need to have different management styles for these products.
And that shift often, if you've got a single threaded product and you're coming to market quickly, that mindset shift that goes from I'm getting functionality out fast to get a customer base versus I've got a big customer base, I now have to be risk adverse. That's quite an uncomfortable and complicated shift for an organization to start to be able to deal with, where risk kicks in, especially at scale. Your behavior needs to shift, like you've just said. And it's quite nice to hear that you've got that multi-speed style innovation approach internally, understanding that it's just some parts of your platform just need to work and work very reliably.
Yeah, so and especially at ServiceNow, because we are truly a platform company. We all part of the same code base. All the applications run on our platform. Let's call that the operating system for business to simplify. But every application uses the same foundation. And so we share, the foundation. All the applications have the same technology stack. I think, one of the things, and there've been a lot of books written about, innovators' dilemma. It's like, when do products become conservative, and therefore, like product managers and folks don't innovate, and they don't cannibalize themselves, or they stop being innovative, and all they do is like iterative development. It is logical that that's the natural course of life. It is logical that once you have more to lose, you need to become more conservative. And by the way, if you got 1,000 customers and you have more customers coming up for renewal of the contract, continuing to use your product, then you're signing up new ones. You should be listening to your install base more than to the new customers coming on, because they're a bigger part of your revenue. And I think one of the traps that we often see is that people don't realize that conservatism, if you're running a big product line, $1 billion business, or I wouldn't say conservatism, but being prudent, being more prudent about innovation is the right thing to do, right? It is exactly what you need to do. So, that's not, so you have people who are really shine in startups, you have people who really shine in scaling things, and you have people who really shine in running things at scale. And those are three very different management styles with very different mindsets.
Well, perhaps we'll come into that in a second when we dig a bit more into innovation. But what I'm interested in just understanding and learning a bit about was, clearly you're developing new product as it's coming along, either driven by technology or customer request or whatever it might be, building innovation into those cycles. Now, there's many companies the world over have utilized a process something similar to that. But what's unique about ServiceNow, I understand, is the growth to a $10 or $12 billion organization, organically driven through product innovation. I wonder if you've got a take on that, Karel.
I was lucky to be on the forefront and actually leading a lot of that innovation. And I think there's a couple things that ServiceNow did really well. First of all, they have what we just talked about, that mindset of what kind of leadership do you need at what stage? We talk about phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And what we mean with that is phase 0 is finding product market fit. Phase 1 is then getting your reference customers. Phase 2 is then scaling it to 100 million to 1 billion. Phase 3 is then trying to find an aftermarket after you are at scale and identify the next logical product. And these are very everybody understands these concepts. So we do also understand that they do require different leadership. They do require hands-off. Once the people who might be really good at phase 1 and phase 0 are not the right people for phase 2. So you got to take away ego. You got to have the ability to just hand it off to the next person who's better at the next phase, and having that culture of management where people recognize that these are different skill sets and different mechanisms has been extremely important. So we've set it up. I've been running NowX as being our incubation center, if you will, for new products. We've had a very specific view on M&A. We did a lot of acquisitions, but never for revenue, always for talent and tuck-in. We love to acquire small teams to help us build a new product, but we hardly ever, or we've never acquired anybody for their revenue.
Right.
And then the other thing that we did is keeping that entrepreneurial spirit alive was very important. So how do you create the atmosphere and the culture where it's okay to run fast and potentially get it wrong? I don't like the term fail fast, or what people say, fail fast or fail often. Failure is not good. It happens and you need to learn from it. But the goal is not to fail. It's there's too many books written about where failure is a beautiful thing that we need to celebrate. It's no, it's something you need to learn from and hopefully not do it that often, right? If you have to fail, you better recognize it fast, but it's not a goal to fail. I'm kind of opposed to the idea of fail fast and fail often. Failure is good. No, failure is not. We're in the business of not failing. We're in the business of succeeding.
What I think you're alluding to, though, which I think is important, especially when you're having the rigorous conversations about moving a product through those categories and those cycles you were describing, is an element of psychological safety that you need in the organization to have kind of truly open conversations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially in the first phases. In the first phases, there's, we always say no point on celebrating what works. Let's talk about what doesn't work.
Right.
So it's sometimes for some people, it's a very direct and conflicting kind of culture that you need to be able to handle. it's like, yeah, pat yourself on the back for about 2 minutes, and then let's go about talking about stuff that is not working and what do we need to do in order to fix it. That obviously, when you're at scale, when you are a product at scale, you're looking for the things that you can amplify. So you're actually looking for the nuggets that are going really well, and you want to amplify that because that's how you get to scale. But in the beginning, you're trying to figure out product market fit, or you're trying to figure out why is this product not moving fast enough.
Right.
You talk a lot more about stuff that's not working. So again, that's a cultural change, and you got to have teams and openness of people be willing to have those tough conversations.
So within that scaled product management environment, I wonder if you could just define for me what good innovation looks like for you, and why that's differentiated from product design or product road mapping or customer feedback.
I would say it's a good question. Anything that starts with a plan is probably not going to succeed.
That's just put a shockwave through the project management community who have to convert to the new way. Like, there's a load of traditionalists maybe listening to this going, no.
Did he say that?
Plans, so, I've never seen a business plan actually being executed. So in all seriousness, folks like me and other executives look at plans and we're like, the only thing we're looking for is how do people think? That's what you're trying to get out of the plan.
That's a good shout. Yeah.
But we don't believe your financials. We don't believe your product idea. We don't believe any of it.
What? You mean that estimate on required budget may not be as accurate as you once thought?
So we don't. So first of all, we don't write business plans for new products at all. What good innovation looks like, we have a very special platform. As you might know, ServiceNow is also a low-code platform, and customers and partners are coding applications with it already. So we have the luxury of actually looking at what our customers already doing with our platform. And if 1, 2, or 3 customers are building, let's just give an example, a solution to manage, onboarding new suppliers with ServiceNow, we go like, if N is 3, not 1, this might actually not be a custom innovation. It should maybe be a product and something we should productize. So we have the luxury of really looking and talking to a lot of customers and see what they do. And I think customer feedback, not on how you should write an application, but what problems customers are trying to solve, that is the fundamental for starting innovation. Then obviously you don't replicate what customers have already built. You then need to elevate it to a much higher level. That's where the product mindset comes in. Right. So but the initial ideas, and mind you, I've been, what I was running was a commercial business incubator, or what I'm running is a commercial business incubator at ServiceNow, where we are developing applications that need to generate revenue within 18 to 24 months. I'm not running a lab or research or that's not what we're doing. So there's a room for that. We have a research department, but that is more fundamental and has a longer view. So for us, always getting the customer feedback in order to understand, are we onto something that a customer might be willing to pay for in the next 12 to 18 months if we get it right, was a very instrumental starting point for any new innovation.
Very good. So the start point is there, and then you've got, I would imagine, a huge amount of hairs running in parallel, especially at the scale of ServiceNow in the last 5 years or so. So talk to us a little bit about how you actually organize for that. So how is it? Are you broadly kicking things off and letting them run, or are you kind of intervening as it goes along? What's the process there?
So the first thing we did, which is important, is we ring-fenced the budget, because any new product development you can only spend a dollar once, right? And if I have to choose whether I spend that dollar, let's say, on marketing an existing product or marketing a new product, I don't already know what the better return on investment will be. It will be the existing product, because we figured out how to turn that investment to something that pays the bills. So if you don't ring fence the budget for innovation, you will always lose out because there's always somebody who says like, hey, but if you give that money to me, I can generate a faster return, a bigger return in the short run. Obviously, innovation is the lifeblood of any company. So in the long run, you're going to miss out. And then what you see is companies who do that, the only way for them to add a new product to their product portfolio is through acquisition.
Right.
So ring fencing is really important if you want to maintain organic growth. Now, how much do you ring fence? Depends, right? Like we looked at typically it's like how big do we want our incubator to be? We said, hey, at any given time, we want 7 initiatives in the incubator. 7 is a nice number. We can manage 7 board meetings, in a month. We can work with 7 teams at the same time, and they're all at different stages. So we chose 7.
And is your expectation, Karel, that all 7 will ultimately go into production, or you might have like 50% of them in production? What is that? What kind of ratios are you working with?
Yeah, like I said, so we accept failure because it's a given. It's not a goal. So we actually said something else. We said we expect 2 new products at the minimum every year. So out of the 7, and then you fill them back in because obviously some of them take 24 months, some of them take even 36 months, some of them take 12 months to hit, the sweet spot on the market. But the rule of thought was 2 a year should be promoted, if you will, to what we call the performance matrix. Now, what is the performance matrix? Once it goes into the performance matrix, we will set targets, sales targets, there will be commission plans, there'll be dedicated people. And so then it becomes part of your annual planning. ServiceNow is a public company. We've got, revenue predictions, and it becomes part of that whole cycle.
Right.
So it becomes part of the budgeting cycle. It becomes part of everything. Until then, it's in the incubator, and it has a shared pool of resources. We also said we hate premature scaling. Now, what I mean with that is if you can't do real damage with 1 or 2 Scrum teams in the beginning, then you're probably not onto something. It's like, again, it comes back to this notion of like, hey, we know how to make $1 of an existing product and give the company an ROI on that $1. So premature scaling means you're bigger than you should be because customers have not told you that this product is good enough to really go. We see this a lot with startups. They hire a lot of people before they actually have their sweet spot in the market. So they're burning a lot of cash, right? And they have to raise more money. That's even more painful in a big corporation because now I'm not burning my cash. I'm burning somebody else's cash because the company could have invested that money into a product or into an organization that actually understands how to figure out how to make a profit. So being very prudent, making sure that you have very agile and not avoid premature scaling. I rather have an understaffed team, slightly understaffed.
Right.
Let's assume that you can never rightly staff a team. You're either overstaffed or understaffed. I prefer a slightly understaffed team than a slightly overstaffed team.
Is that, because of when you have a busy team as a result of the understaffing, that they're just making fast and quick decisions the whole time because they have to do that to keep afloat?
Spot on. Yeah. Spot on. They're better teams. It's like, look at football teams. What happens when, somebody gets a red card, right? We were always surprised on how well 10 players can compete against the 11. It's not a given that the 11 will just walk over the 10.
Yeah.
Now, that's an understaffed team, and it's actually understaffed compared to the competition and competing. So it's a different scenario, but I'm just using it to illustrate that, nobody can hide if you're understaffed. You got to avoid like burning up your teams, obviously. Then it's not understaffed anymore. Then it's just completely wrong staffed. That's something else. But having the camaraderie to make fast decisions, to not sit only in your own box. Like I'm a product manager. All I do is, this requirements analysis, and I expect somebody else to do that. It's like, no, you're a team. You need to work together.
Yeah. You know what I always say, Rob?
What do you always say, David? Is it the same thing that I always say?
If you want to get something done, ask a busy person.
Yeah. Because they're good at getting stuff done, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's true.
It's a funny adage, isn't it?
Change the staffing in terms of the platform, right? Because to be honest, at first, like 2 years ago, I thought ServiceNow was the ticketing system, and it must be something that you've heard quite often. I assume in the last year.
Unfortunately, yeah.
You see such a huge change in the impact of the platform.
All that innovation, Karel?
No, but that's actually, it's a real mind shift, I think. If you look at the platform now in the workflows, but also the business side of the impact of the platform, I think is huge, to be honest. Is that something that how did you work on that to open up those innovations?
So this is probably a longer answer than you want, but so imagine that like I said, the platform is the shared component, right? And you're right. So we all build on that platform, and it has fundamental things like analytics and workflow, and those are the things that we all use. And AI now part of that platform foundation. Obviously, their application team saying like, I need something additional from the platform because I'm building application X. And in order for application X, I'm just going to make this up. I need dynamic currency conversion fields, that need to be part of the platform. And then the platform team goes like, okay, that costs us one Scrum team for 3 weeks or whatever. So we have these dependency mappings. There's all these asks from all these app teams that they want something special from the platform. And when we started the incubator, we said like, okay, we're going to build applications on the platform, but we are going to file 0 dependencies to the platform teams. And people looked at me, it's like, why would you do that? And the rationale was pretty easy. What we said is, well, first of all, we don't generate revenue yet, so we haven't earned the right to ask to change the platform. If you're the ITSM application, you're a $3.5 or $4 billion business line for ServiceNow, you have every right to ask for dependencies and changes to the platform. But we said like, no, we don't have the right. We haven't earned the right. The second thing we said is like, if it's good enough for ITSM and they can build a $3.5 billion business and $1 billion CSM business, and et cetera, surely we can write new applications on this technology stack. So the incubator or any new product that comes out of ServiceNow, the first thing that they need to do is just say, you got a gigantic technology toolkit that is already there. Your job is to leverage that rather than ask for new stuff.
What I love about that example as well is how you're taking a robustly commercial view of the architecture. So instead of like, hey, all possibilities are possible, guys, let's whiteboard out all possibilities, you're going, no, like, it's almost like great art is created within boundaries sort of thing. You can create some pressure on that situation, and you're likely to get an outcome faster, I would probably think.
Absolutely. So we can go a lot faster. We know that it's reliable and it will be commercially great. It runs on the same thing. It has the same procedures as everything else. We know how to deploy it. We know how to support it. We know how to maintain it. There's just one thing. Like, some engineers don't like that straitjacket.
Oh no!
Where you say
no, they like to invent the plumbing. We need a new plumbing system. If you let an engineer design a house, there'd be 5 heating systems, 3 water systems, and 4 electrical systems, because it's good fun to do that. So I'm just going to do that. Yeah.
But you'd be surprised if you explain to, especially when new engineers come in and they're like, "Oh, great, I get to work in the incubator," so they think they can make all kinds of technology choices, and then learners like, "No, your job is to basically say, here's a big toolkit. It's got almost everything that you can imagine of, but that's your world. That's where you need to choose from." And like, oh, but in my previous life, I used, an in-memory database. Why can't I have a special flavor? And it's like, no. And then you explain to them, it's like, well, here's why. We got 9 or 10,000 customers. They all run the same stack. There's a reason why ServiceNow is so successful. There's a reason why we still have one support organization, why we almost have 0 downtime for our customers, because it's like, so, and most engineers actually appreciate the fact that, because they've also lived in technology companies where it was all hunky-dory and great and good fun to innovate, but then once it got started shipping and customers started complaining, they were doing all the support work.
Yeah.
Right. So, so at ServiceNow, not so much. right? Like because we know how to scale this. We know how to scale this up, down, left, right, and it's such a robust enterprise grade platform. So that's like, so they get to keep spending more time doing what they love, which is solving customer problems, and not, and the oil machine that we have on supporting and upgrading and running this thing for big enterprises is just freeing a lot of their time up compared to previous experiences.
So we've walked through the idea generation piece and how you're winding in kind of new thinking and innovation into that process. We've talked through the sort of structuring of it, how you need to sort of robustly financially manage the situation. And then we've talked a bit about kind of architectural guidelines and kind of how you get speed through teams and speed through making the right technical decisions. I wonder why most organizations struggle with this, Karel. So what's your take on organizations that maybe you've tried innovation, and it might be that they've created a lab with a bit of wacky green turf on the wall.
There's moss on the wall, right? So your innovation success is defined by how much greenery you've put on your wall, square footage or square meterage, whichever way you prefer it, and that is your KPI for success.
Zany, because it's creative, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. It's innovative.
Well, it's exactly that. I think there's a couple of things, and I think it also is. It has changed over time. 15 years ago or 20 years ago, there were no such thing as platform organizations and platform companies. So an incubator would be, you would have 7 projects like we have, but there would actually be 7 different products with companies with their own company name and their own company branding and everything like that, right? And it was very cool, right? Like, and you need to have a separate building, and that building needed to have open space, and it needed to be looking cool and all that kind of stuff. And so it was trying to mimic the startup environment. And I think that has changed in the platform economy, where the entire company needs to be cool, first of all, in order to attract talent. But your goal is to drive innovation, your goal is not to be cool or different. And that is something, and I came from I ran my own startup. And if you look at my resume, in the .com era, I actually ran a commercial business incubator as a VC firm. So I've also know the other side of the house. So it's, I think there are a couple of lessons learned. So first of all, ring fence the budget. Otherwise, it will only be a matter of years before somebody makes the argument to the CFO that this is a really bad idea and I could deliver a better ROI. So there needs to be top-down commitment that we're running this as a program.
Let's help our EBITDA by stopping spending money on business development and innovation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the cheapest cost-cutting exercise in the world that is absolutely to the long-term detriment of the company.
And if you can't show short-term success, and if everything you do is cool, but potentially going to do something great for the company in 5 years, but not doing anything in the short term, it's very hard to defend that.
Yeah.
Right? People who run innovation for big corporations need to understand that this is a commercial enterprise. And so anything you can do to help the short-term as well as the long term, but also on the short term goals of the company, the more chances you are for not getting any budget cut or for getting a long term financing. So, our program has been running for 7-8 years with great success, and so obviously now the name of the game is completely changing. We'll probably talk about that because of AI. It's a completely different world of innovation out there. But having clarity on the dollars is one thing. To look for people who have that pragmatic mindset, understand the phases that we talked about, phase 1 and phase 0. And then the last thing I would say is what we try to do is what I always say, don't fight the mothership, right? ServiceNow is a great brand name. We got some of the best sales team in the world for when it comes to enterprise software. So why would I try to build an incubation model where people would come up with their own branding and hiring their own salespeople and we've seen those models. They've been very successful in the past, in the 90s. But that's not a great model. It's if you can leverage assets that the big company has, access to customers, a marketing brand name, you should, right?
The bit that always occurs to me when you've got when you've got the benefit of creating something that's attached to a mothership, to use your terminology, is you have got a scaling mechanism there that if you were trying to do this by yourself, you wouldn't have that scaling mechanism.
Right.
So why not use it? It would be absolutely crazy not to.
Yeah, because it's not always cool, right? Like, it's much
right.
cooler to come up with your own brand name and your own logo and, have your own swag and your own processes. And it's like there's things in a big organization that you need to completely shield your incubation and innovation away from. It's the governance and the process and the oversight and the long cycles. Yeah, don't use that. Right. But there's other stuff, access to customers, salespeople, marketing, brand awareness. Like, do use that. Like, so the beauty is you get to pick and choose the things that work for you. You gotta work, go work with those. And the ones that are inhibiting you from going fast are the ones that you need to block. And you can only do that if you get exec level support. This is not something that anybody should try to do like without C-level support, and you can only do it when the financing is guaranteed and committed for a period of time. And otherwise, it's like starting a business and getting funding and knowing that when you run out of funding, there will be no next round of funding. Then it might be great fun for a year, but you're not going to be successful because you're going to run out of money. And it's the same thing. Like, this thing costs money in the beginning, so you gotta. But your job is to get innovation out there in the hands of customers. That's the only thing that matters.
Well, let's maybe bring our conversation today to a bit of a close by bringing in one of the main elephants in the industry at the moment of AI, and I guess specifically agentic AI in this particular case. A lot of organizations, proof of concepting at the moment, trying to get their heads around this stuff. I think within our industry, at least, we sort of see this year as the beginning of the scaling process of AI, so moving out of basic proof of concept into something that is more commercially aware and potentially something that's going to drive revenue or cost saving, depending on your use of it. But I think we're also conscious of the sheer influx of announcements and opportunity and product that's kind of flowing onto the market at this kind of extreme rate of innovation that's going on at the moment. What's your take on that? And, by way of closing, how should organizations get their heads around that and then organize their innovation processes to take best advantage of it?
Yeah, well, let's start with the latter. It's something that I typically say to a lot of customers: don't get ready, just get started. Right, nobody. You cannot plan for this AI revolution, and I'm still calling it a revolution because I think it's bigger than August 8th, 1995. If anybody of you knows what that date was,
Windows 95.
No,
Windows 95?
It was the date.
Right?
It was the date that Netscape went public and we had the first overnight $1 billion company. And the internet was born, and it gave birth to Yahoo and Amazon and all these other great companies.
Netscape Navigator, the joys of it.
Exactly.
Vignette templates. Let's remember how the early web was built.
Yeah, it's prior to Internet Explorer and so that was the massive revolution. Obviously, the birth of the commercial internet. Then later on, we had cloud and we had mobile, and I think AI. Well, I'm certain the AI revolution is far bigger than all of those three combined.
Yeah,
and so you cannot afford a wait and see mode. You cannot say, "Oh, we're not ready. We need to plan for this." You cannot say we don't have the resources. Nobody has the resources. You got to train the resources, right? They don't graduate from school and, are like we all have to re-educate ourselves. We all need to reimagine. So this is.
See, I told you, Rob, real. It is definitely bigger than RPA.
It's definitely bigger than RPA. Yeah, for sure. No, it's it's a massive revolution. If you look at what happened in the last 2-3 years and you just exponentially, forecast that into the future, how fast these models are becoming better and how the capabilities, then we can all see that by 2030 and 4 or 5 years from now, the world will be completely different. The way we do work, the way we execute work, the way workflows are executed. Talk about ServiceNow. It will be a hybrid model of AI agents and humans working together to route work. And whether that's work initiated by you or by another agent or by an employee or by a customer or by another business, it's massive what is going to happen. And I think, we can't. So first of all, my advice is you don't sit on the sidelines. Don't plan for this stuff. Just get started. There is tangible small steps that you can implement that already have huge cost savings. So you don't have to start with reimagining your entire business. That is the thing that bothers me most. Like people's like, I thought this was going to automatically learn about our supply chain and optimize our supply levels. No, it's not. But it can help you optimize a baby step in your supply chain. It can help you make the supply chain planners be 10 times more effective at their job. That's where we are today, right? And we will get there to the big ideas of completely redefining industries. But it's not going to be in one go. It's going to be step by step by step by step by step, right? I have to remind people that, during the internet age, in 96 or 97, somebody thought that selling dog food online was a great idea, right? We will have those kinds of ideas within AI as well, where 10 years from now, we look back, it's like, that was not an AI application. So, you got to try. You got to start.
What have you been up to?
Yeah, so I was doing research into user adoption about 15 years ago. And trust was already on the table back then. But it was a very different conversation about trust. It was more about, what does this button do? Systems often failed, bugs were common, and users expected things to break. Trust was fragile, but also forgiving. We were like, we cannot expect it to do this or that. So if you fast forward to today, and the conversation has shifted dramatically, because we're now automating decisions, embedding AI, orchestrating entire workflows that users may not ever see, or even employees for that matter. Who knows? Invisible design has become the default, and that means trust isn't just about function anymore. It's about intent, ethics, control. So if you dive into what Harvard professor Sandra Sucher is saying in The Power of Trust, she says, people don't trust you because you're perfect. They trust you because of how you behave when things go wrong. So how do you design for that kind of trust, especially in enterprise platforms that run at massive scale? So I was really curious, what's your point on that, Karel?
Wow, that's a great question. I think you're touching upon something that is very real, right? AI trust, AI governance, but also I don't think so. We have this internal debate as well. If you automate a workflow, as the example that you gave, there's multiple ways of doing it, right? You can use the traditional workflow Boolean logic, if then else, and when you do that, every time that workflow is invoked, it follows exactly the same steps. So there's an audit trail, and you know exactly what is happening. And if anything goes wrong, you just change the Boolean logic of that workflow. So that's one. That's not a black box. It's still invisible, but there is a prescription on how things are being executed. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the steps in that Boolean logic could be executed by an AI agent. So now we have a playbook and says hey, step 3 in that playbook is invoke an agent, and that agent needs to look up something somewhere or do something and come back, and then we continue the workflow. That's still how the agent does it is still a little bit like invisible design, but overall you're still following the script. And then the last thing, and this is the thing where what is happening really quickly, is we go away with the Boolean logic. We just learn an AI agent on how to do stuff. And that is the scary part, because then is when customers are saying, how did he learn that? Or she or he, I don't know, what is an agent, a he or she?
That's interesting, huh?
But
that is interesting, isn't it? I've never really thought about it. It's not. Shouldn't be an
it's a she. We could use more she.
I think it's a she. Yeah. So how does she does that, right? How did she do that? So how does the agent know how to do certain things, and where did they pick up their trades, and what data was it trained on, and you get all these questions. So data transparency, AI transparency, AI governance, understanding this. And being able to explain to customers why agents are behaving the way they're behaving is becoming incredibly important. It's even becoming more important with all the geopolitics going on, and that's more the data aspect of the equation. It's not only the AI stuff, but also what data and what are you trained on.
I think that also touches upon what Tristan Harris says. He's a former Google design ethicist. And he says you can't separate design from values. So every UX decision, every AI rule, every default setting communicates something about who you are as a company. And I think that's so fascinating because Mo Gavdat also said that we should treat AI as educating our kids. Like if we help them grow as who we want to become, then AI and all our agents will behave in, the most perfect sense of expressing our values. Is this something that you're also working on in terms of innovation? Is that also based on the values of ServiceNow? Does that come into play at all?
I think this is more a question of like the folks who are actually developing the AI engines. So like OpenAI and Google, etc. So at ServiceNow, we leverage those engines. We're agnostic. We spend a lot of time on helping organizations to tackle that first topic that you had. So we have an AI governance framework that will allow organizations to track where is AI used in the enterprise, which data, my data, is being used to train AI in the enterprise. How often did it get it wrong? What was the impact of an AI giving a wrong recommendation? What do we do to mitigate it? So those are all the things that we help organizations with, whether it's our AI or somebody else's AI, to start tracking and to start building a governance structure and a legal structure about. Because obviously it's one of the things that organizations also need to start publishing at some point. It's like, where are you using AI? Where are you using autonomous agents? And where are you automating decisions without humans in the loop? And how do you protect that the decisions that have been derived from those are the right ones? So on the first one, I actually think that's almost an outdated view. I think it will just be a matter of time before AI agents will treat humans as children. So I think the treat the agents and train them as children. I think that was something that was applicable 2-3 years ago, but I think we're a little bit further than that already. I think we're pretty close of last time you have a conversation with ChatGPT, I think ChatGPT is becoming almost our shrink and our psychiatrist. So it's the other way around already. Like the technology is moving so fast. I think in 3 years, and that's also the scary part and the uncomfortable part, right? Like but there's no stopping it. Like there's such great things that we can do with the technology, and there's such horrendous and horrific things you can do with this technology, right? And I think that is the crossroad for humanity, is like, how do we make sure that we truly go after, I'll give you an example, an AI medical doctor, will be available like at the highest level, right? The highest knowledge level possible for anybody living in a rural area around the world. Think about Africa, where we do not have doctors in every village. They can now have a world class, not just somebody who flies in, whose hobby and who's like very passionate and motivated about helping people. No, they can have the world's best physician and medical doctor. It's a virtual one, but with some clever technology, you can self-diagnose. We can do so many things. So if you think about the impact on healthcare, if you think about all those kinds of things, there's great stuff. If you start thinking about the defense industry, there's also very scary stuff. Or if you think about the impact on democracies and news, like there's all kinds of stuff that we need to figure out. But this technology is here to stay. It will move fast, and it's scary and exciting at the same time.
Well, on that note, I think we will draw our conversation today to a bit of a conclusion. Karel, thank you so much for such a thought-provoking and very helpful and practical take on large-scale innovation. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Now, we end every episode of this podcast by asking our guest what they're excited about doing next. And that could be something in your personal life, like you've got a great restaurant booked at the weekend, or it could be something in your business life. So, Karel, what are you excited about doing next?
I'll go with a personal one. So it's spring again. I'm a vivid catamaran sailor. I live here on the north coast of the North Sea, and we've taken the boat out for a couple of spins.
Very nice.
So I'm looking forward to go out on the still very cold water.
I was literally going to say the North Sea is a freezing body of water. Do you ever go and take it into any warmer locations?
Yes, I did. Last November, I was fortunate enough to sail in St. Bart's, which was the opposite. That's more like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably that was beautiful. Like hard work.
Well, it's like a lot of wind and big waves, so hard work. But 30-degree weather, 30-degree water. It's all good.
Yes, a couple of rums on there at the end of the day.
Just a couple,
of course. Yeah, of course.
If you would like to discuss any of the issues on this week's show and how they might impact you and your business, please get in touch with us at cloudrealities@capgemini.com. We're all on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to connect and DM if you have any questions for the show to tackle. And of course, please rate and subscribe to our podcast. It really helps us improve the show. A huge thanks to Karel. Our sound and editing wizards Ben and Louis, our producer Marcel, and of course to all our listeners. See you in another reality next week.